My name is Emily, and I'm 32. Last Thanksgiving, I sat at my mom's table in our small Ohio town, the smell of turkey and laughter filling the air. My brother Nathan glowed with pride as Mom gushed about his new lakefront home. Her smile was warm, but her words carried a sting hinting I was falling behind. I held my coffee mug tight, hiding a secret that could turn the table quiet. Have you ever felt unseen at a family gathering share where you're watching from hit? Like if this hits home and subscribe for more real stories? The clatter of plates faded as we moved to the living room, pumpkin pie slices balanced on our laps. I settled into the worn couch, the one Dad used to nap on, feeling the weight of Mom's earlier words. Nathan stood by the fireplace, his grin wide, as Mom launched into another story about his new home. Its granite countertops, the view of the lake at sunrise, how it was the kind of place you raise a family in. Her eyes sparkled and everyone nodded, caught up in her excitement. I sipped my coffee, the chipped mug warm in my hands, trying to smile along. Then Mom turned to me, her voice soft but sharp. "When are you going to catch up, sweetheart? You know, get a place like that." The room didn't go silent, but it might as well have. My cheeks burned. I laughed it off, muttering something about loving my apartment, but my throat tightened. I'd heard that tone before, the one that said I was the steady one, the reliable one, but never the one who shone. For years I'd been the sister who showed up, who planned birthdays, who called just to check in. But Nathan's milestones, his job promotions, his big purchases, they were the ones Mom framed and hung on her walls. I glanced at my cousin Sarah, hoping she'd jump in. She caught my eye and tried, bless her. "Hey, Emily's place is cozy, right? It's got that great view of the park." But her words fumbled and she winced, realizing she'd just called my apartment small in front of everyone. Mom waved her hand, dismissing it. "Cozy's fine for now, but Nathan's got a real home. You'll see it at Christmas, Sarah. It's stunning." The conversation rolled on, but I felt stuck, like I was watching from outside a window. What Mom didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 6 months ago I'd signed the papers for my own house. A small one, nothing like Nathan's but mine. Every penny came from years of overtime, skipped vacations, and saying no to things I wanted so I could save. I'd painted the walls myself, hung curtains, even fixed a leaky faucet with a YouTube tutorial. It was my sanctuary, but I hadn't told anyone. Not Mom, not Nathan, not even Sarah. I wanted it to be mine first, free from their questions or comparisons. Now sitting there, I wondered if I'd kept it secret too long. The mug in my hands, the one Dad gave me when I was 12, felt heavier. He'd painted it himself, a clumsy blue flower on the side, and told me it was for my big dreams. He saw me not just as the quiet kid who got good grades, but as someone who'd build something real. Mom never got that. She loved me, I knew that, but her love came with a measuring stick, and I was always a few inches short. I traced the flower with my thumb, trying to steady myself, but Sarah's comment and Mom's question kept circling in my head. Nathan laughed about something pulling me back. He was showing Aunt Patricia his phone, probably pictures of his new deck. Mom leaned in, her voice carrying. "He's done so well, hasn't he? I always knew he'd make us proud." I wanted to be happy for him, I did. We used to be close, sharing secrets and sneaking extra cookies as kids. But somewhere along the way, his wins became the family's wins, and mine just faded into the background. I set the mug down, my hands shaky, and stood to clear plates, needing an excuse to move. The room felt too small, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep smiling. In the kitchen, I stacked plates in the sink, the warm water soothing my hands, but not my thoughts. The laughter from the living room drifted in Nathan's voice loudest, recounting how he picked the perfect hardwood for his floors. I scrubbed a pan harder than needed as Mom's words from earlier echoed. Catch up. Like I was running a race I didn't sign up for. I'd spent years building my life piece by piece, but it was never enough for her spotlight. Nathan's wife Lauren breezed in, grabbing a wine glass. "You're quiet tonight," she said, her smile tight. "Must be weird. All this talk about Nathan's big win, huh?" Her tone wasn't kind, more like she was poking at a bruise. I rinsed a spoon, keeping my voice even. I'm happy for him. She raised an eyebrow. Sure, but it's gotta sting, right? Still renting that little place? I froze, the water dripping from my hands. She didn't know about my house, nobody did, but her words cut deeper than Mom's. They felt personal, like she enjoyed watching me squirm. I turned back to the dishes, my jaw tight. Lauren lingered, sipping her wine, then added, You should see their new place. It's the kind of home that says you've made it. She walked out, leaving her glass on the counter. I wanted to call after her to say I'd made it too, that my house was real, with a porch I'd sanded myself and a bedroom I'd painted sage green. But the words stuck. Telling her would feel like begging for approval, and I was done with that. Aunt Patricia slipped into the kitchen, her apron still tied from earlier. She picked up a towel and started drying plates beside me. You okay, honey? She asked, her voice low. I nodded, but my hands shook as I scrubbed. She didn't push, just kept drying, her presence steady. You know, she said, after a moment, I used to feel like I was always chasing my sister's shadow. Your mom's got a way of picking favorites. I looked at her, surprised. Patricia rarely talked about her past, but her words hit home. She squeezed my arm. You're doing just fine, Emily. More than fine. Her kindness cracked something open in me, but before I could respond, Mom's voice cut through from the living room. Emily, come see this. Nathan's showing us the virtual tour. I dried my hands, my stomach twisting. Patricia gave me a small smile, like she knew the weight of that call. I walked back, forcing my face to stay neutral. Nathan held his phone up the screen, glowing with images of his sprawling house, all glass and polished wood. Mom clapped her hands. Isn't it perfect, Nathan? You should teach your sister a thing or two about ambition. The room laughed, but it wasn't funny to me. I sat on the arm of the couch, my fingers digging into the fabric. I thought about the photo I'd found earlier, tucked in a drawer, of me and Nathan as kids building a fort out of blankets. We'd been a team then, no scorecards, no comparisons. Now every word from Mom felt like a tally, and I was losing. I glanced at the shelf where she kept Nathan's old soccer trophy gleaming under the lamp. My spelling bee ribbons were somewhere in a box, probably the attic. Sarah caught my eye again, her face apologetic, but I looked away. I didn't want pity. I wanted to tell them about my house, to see Mom's face change, to watch Lauren choke on her wine. But I didn't. Not yet. The secret was mine, and letting it out here in this moment felt like handing it over to be judged. I stood mumbling about needing air and slipped toward the back door. The cold November night waited outside, and I needed it to clear the noise in my head. But Mom's voice followed me, bright and oblivious, calling Nathan's name like it was the only one that mattered. The mall was a blur of Black Friday chaos, shoppers jostling with bags, holiday music blaring from speakers. I trailed behind Mom and Sarah, my boots heavy on the tiled floor, still rattled from last night's dinner. The cold air I'd stepped into hadn't cleared much, just left me feeling raw. Mom was on a mission, weaving through crowds to find a housewarming gift for Nathan. Something special for his new place, she said, her voice bright, like she hadn't spent the evening slicing me open with her words. We stopped at a store with gleaming home decor shelves, lined with vases and custom signs. Mom held up a crystal bowl, catching the light. This would look stunning on Nathan's dining table. Don't you think, Emily? I nodded, my throat tight, but she didn't wait for an answer. She was already telling Sarah about his wraparound porch, how it was perfect for summer barbecues. I stared at a display of house number plaques, picturing one for my own front door, the little cottage I'd made mine. I hadn't even hung a sign yet, too busy making it my own, but the thought of it grounded me for a second. Sarah nudged me, her eyes soft. You okay? You've been quiet. I forced a smile. Just tired. Long night. She hesitated, then started to say something about her own family pressures, how her mom always compared her to her brother. But Mom cut in, waving a hand. Sarah, you'll get there. Nathan's just a step ahead, that's all. Emily, you should take notes from him. Settle down, get a real home. Her tone was light, like she was joking, but it landed like a slap. I gripped the strap of my purse, my knuckles white, and looked away. I wanted to tell her then, to say I had a home, that I'd been paying a mortgage for months, that I didn't need Nathan's playbook. but the words wouldn't come. They felt too big, too fragile, like they'd shatter under her scrutiny. Instead, I followed her to the next aisle where she picked out a framed print of a lake just right for Nathan's living room. My chest burned. I'd spent years saving working late shifts, eating ramen to afford my place, and she didn't even ask about my life, didn't wonder what I'd been building. We paused by a coffee cart, and Mom started chatting with the barista, a woman with a tired smile. "My son just bought a gorgeous house," she said, her voice carrying over the mall's hum. "Lake view, 3 bedrooms, the works. He's really made something of himself." The barista nodded politely, but Mom kept going, painting Nathan's life like a magazine spread. She didn't mention me, not a word about her daughter who'd clawed her way to her own quiet victory. I stood there invisible, my hands stuffed in my pockets, feeling like I was shrinking. Sarah tried to pivot, asking me about my job, but I barely heard her. My eyes caught on a display across the aisle, a row of custom house signs etched with family names. I imagined one that said, "Emily's home, bold and simple, claiming my space." The thought lit something in me, a spark of defiance, but it flickered out fast. Mom's voice pulled me back now, telling Sarah how Nathan's house was his legacy, something to pass down. I turned away, pretending to check my phone, but my hands were shaking. I wasn't just overlooked. I was erased. Back at Mom's house, the kitchen smelled of reheated stuffing and gravy. I chopped carrots for a leftover salad, the knife's rhythm steadying my hands, but my mind was still spinning from the mall. The weight of Mom's words, her casual erasure of me in front of a stranger, sat like a stone in my chest. I wanted to shake it off, to focus on the clinking dishes and Sarah's chatter from the dining room, but it clung tight, heavy and cold. Nathan burst in, phone in hand, his energy filling the space. "You guys gotta see this," he said, swiping to a video of his new home's backyard, all manicured grass and stone paths. Mom followed, her apron dusted with flour, her face lighting up. "Oh, Nathan, it's like a dream. Your kids will love that yard someday." She leaned over his shoulder, pointing at the screen. "Look at that pergola. Emily, isn't it gorgeous? You could use some of this vision for your life." I kept chopping, my grip tight on the knife. Vision. Like I was stumbling through life blind. My house had a yard too small, but mine with a patch of wildflowers I'd planted last spring. I'd spent evenings there, coffee in hand, watching the sunset shift the colors of the sky. But Mom didn't know that. She didn't ask. She just assumed I was still renting, still waiting for my life to start. I muttered, "It's nice," but my voice was flat and Nathan didn't notice, too busy zooming in on his outdoor fireplace. Lauren sauntered in, stirring a pot on the stove. "Emily, you should visit us," she said, her tone syrupy. "Maybe it'll inspire you to aim higher." "You're still at that call center, right?" My jaw clenched. I'd left the call center 2 years ago, moved into a better job managing a small office, but she didn't care enough to know. I sliced a carrot too hard, the blade nicking my finger. Blood welled up and I grabbed a paper towel, my hands shaking. "I'm fine where I am," I said, but Lauren just smirked like she'd won something. Mom didn't catch the exchange. She was too busy pulling out chairs, calling everyone to eat. "Nathan, tell them about the smart home system," she said, her voice proud, like she'd built it herself. He launched into a story about voice-activated lights, and the table erupted in oohs and ahs. I sat across from Aunt Patricia, who gave me a quick, knowing look, but it wasn't enough to dull the ache. Mom's praise for Nathan was a song I'd heard my whole life, and I was just background noise. I pushed my plate away, barely touching the food. My eyes landed on Nathan's old soccer trophy on the shelf, its gold plastic gleaming like it was mocking me. I remembered the day he won it, how Mom cheered louder than anyone, how she'd framed his picture in the hallway. My own wins, the debate medals, the scholarship I'd earned, were tucked away somewhere, probably gathering dust. I'd never minded much before, but now, with my house a secret I couldn't share, it felt like I was disappearing. Lauren leaned over, her voice low but sharp. "You know, Emily, not everyone's cut out for the big stuff. No shame in keeping things simple." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Simple. Like my life was a single brushstroke, not a canvas I'd spent years painting. I wanted to snap back to tell her about my mortgage, my late nights learning to tile a bathroom, my pride in every nail I'd hammered. But the words choked me, trapped behind years of staying quiet to keep the peace. I set my fork down, my hands curling into fists under the table, and stared at Mom, still beaming at Nathan. The room felt like it was closing in, and I wasn't sure how much more I could take before something broke. The second Thanksgiving gathering was louder, the house packed with cousins, uncles, and neighbors spilling into Mom's dining room. I stood by the buffet arranging napkins, my hands moving on autopilot. The air was thick with chatter, the clink of wine glasses and the smell of fresh rolls. I'd barely slept last night's dinner, still churning in my mind, Lauren's smirk and Mom's blind praise for Nathan cutting deeper with every replay. I wanted to be anywhere else, but family doesn't let you slip away that easily. Mom called everyone to the table, her voice bright as she raised a glass. To Nathan, she said, her smile wide. To his beautiful new home, a place we're all so proud of. The room cheered, glasses clinking, and Nathan nodded, soaking it in. I clutched the water pitcher, my fingers tight, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. Mom's eyes slid to me, softening, but not in the way I wanted. And to Emily, she added, her tone gentle, almost pitying. You'll get there someday, honey. Just keep trying. The words hit like a punch. My breath caught, and the room seemed to tilt. I set the pitcher down, my hands trembling, and looked around. Nathan was laughing with Uncle Greg, Sarah was watching me with wide eyes, and Aunt Patricia's brow furrowed like she sensed the storm brewing. Mom didn't see it. She turned back to Nathan, asking about his home's skylights, oblivious to the weight she'd just dropped on me. Someday. Like my life was a rough draft, not a finished page. I felt it then, a surge building in my chest, hot and sharp, years of being the afterthought boiling over. My eyes landed on the old ceramic mug on the table, the one Dad painted, sitting by my plate like a quiet anchor. He'd always said I was enough, just as I was, no comparisons needed. I picked it up, the rough glaze steadying me, and something snapped into place. I couldn't stay silent anymore, not when every word from Mom erased me a little more. I stood my chair, scraping the floor louder than I meant. The chatter dipped, eyes turning my way. My heart pounded, but my voice came out clear, stronger than I felt. I bought a home 6 months ago, I said, looking straight at Mom. It's mine. Paid for with my own money. I just didn't invite anyone who doubts me. The room went still, forks paused midair. Mom's glass froze halfway to her lips, her face paling. Nathan's smile faltered, and Lauren's eyes narrowed like I'd stolen something from her. Sarah gasped a small, sharp sound, and Patricia's lips curved, just a flicker of pride. But Mom's expression was what held me, a mix of shock and something else, maybe hurt, maybe disbelief. I wanted her to say something, anything, but she just stared, her mouth slightly open. The silence stretched heavy, and I felt exposed, like I'd ripped open a wound for everyone to see. My hands gripped the mug tighter, my voice shaking now, but I didn't sit down. I couldn't. Not yet. The silence hung like fog, thick and suffocating, as every pair of eyes drilled into me. My words echoed in my head, raw and final, and I felt naked under the dining room's warm lights. Mom's face was a mask, her lips parted, but no sound came. I wanted her to speak, to ask about my home, to show she cared, but she just blinked, her glass still raised. My pulse hammered, and I stood frozen, waiting for something to break the unbearable quiet. Lauren's voice cut through, first sharp and cold. You're making this about you now. This is Nathan's moment, Emily. Her words were a blade slicing through the tension, and heads turned to her. Nathan shifted in his seat, his brow furrowed, but he didn't speak. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Lauren leaned forward, her voice louder. If you bought a house, why hide it? Unless you're just fishing for attention. Her smirk twisted the knife, and a few cousins exchanged glances, their whispers buzzing like static. Mom finally set her glass down, her hands unsteady. Emily, why didn't you tell us? She asked, her tone more accusation than curiosity. We're your family. You don't keep things like that secret. Her words stung worse than Lauren's, each one a reminder that I'd never measured up in her eyes. I wanted to scream that I'd kept it secret because of her, because every achievement I had was weighed against Nathan's and found wanting. But my throat closed and my eyes burned. Cousin Jacob tried to lighten the mood, chuckling. "Hey, a house is a house, right? Let's eat." But his laugh was hollow, and no one joined in. Sarah reached for my hand under the table. Her fingers warm, but I barely felt it. My gaze fell to the tablecloth, its faded floral pattern blurring as my vision swam. I'd dreamed of this moment of telling them about my home, but not like this, not with their stares pinning me like a specimen. Nathan cleared his throat, his voice low. "Why didn't you say anything, Em? I mean, that's huge." His question sounded genuine, but it carried an edge like I'd betrayed him by staying silent. I looked at him, searching for the brother I used to know, the one who'd share his Halloween candy when Mom wasn't looking. But all I saw was confusion, maybe even resentment, like my truth had stolen his light. Mom spoke again, her voice sharper now. "You could have told me, Emily. I've been worried about you, thinking you're still stuck in that apartment. And you let me go on like that." Her words were a slap, blaming me for her assumptions, her comparisons. The room spun and I gripped the table's edge, my nails digging into the wood. Lauren's smirk, Nathan's frown, Mom's disappointment, they pressed in each one a weight I couldn't carry. Aunt Patricia started to speak, her voice soft, but Lauren cut her off. "Let's be real, if it was worth bragging about, we'd have heard by now." The table gasped, and even Jacob winced. My chest caved, the air gone. My home, my quiet pride, the nights I'd spent making it mine, all reduced to a punchline. I looked at Mom, begging for her to defend me, but she just sat there, her face a mix of shock and shame. The room was a cage, and I was trapped, my heart splintering with no way out. The morning after that disastrous dinner, I stood in my apartment, sunlight spilling through the blinds, casting stripes across the cardboard boxes I'd pulled from the closet. My hands were still shaky from last night, Mom's silence and Lauren's venom replaying like a bad song. But something else stirred in me, a quiet resolve like a seed cracking open. I'd spilled my truth, and though it hadn't landed the way I'd hoped, it was out. Now I had to decide what to do with it. I zipped up a duffel bag, stuffing in clothes and a few books, my mind set on my house, the cottage I'd kept hidden. It was an hour's drive, a world away from Mom's crowded table and Nathan's shadow. I needed to be there, to walk my own floors, to remind myself why I'd fought so hard for it. But more than that, I wanted to claim it, not just for me, but for the people who saw me without a scorecard. I pulled out my phone and texted Sarah and Aunt Patricia, my fingers steady as I typed housewarming at my place next weekend. "Just us." "You in?" Sarah replied, instantly, a string of excited words that made me smile. Patricia sent a simple, "Proud of you, honey. I'll be there." Their warmth was a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of last night's wreckage. I set the phone down and grabbed a notebook, jotting ideas for the gathering. A simple dinner, maybe spaghetti candles on the table, music from the old radio I'd fixed up. Nothing flashy, just real, like the life I'd built. I paused, my pen hovering, and thought about Mom. Her face last night, shocked and distant, haunted me. Part of me wanted to call her to explain why I'd stayed quiet, how her comparisons had carved out pieces of me over the years. Instead, I tore a fresh page from the notebook and started writing a letter. "Mom." I began, my handwriting uneven. "I love you, but I need you to hear me." I poured out the hurt, the years of feeling like an afterthought, the pride I felt in my home despite her doubts. I didn't know if I'd send it, but putting it on paper felt like loosening a knot in my chest. The thought of inviting Nathan flickered, but I pushed it aside. He'd looked at me last night like I'd pulled the rug out from under him, and I wasn't ready to bridge that gap. Not yet. I wanted this housewarming to be mine, surrounded by people who didn't need me to prove anything. I walked to the kitchen counter where I'd set the custom house sign I'd bought at the mall, its carved letters spelling out home. I traced the word, feeling its weight. This was my first step, not just opening my door, but choosing who got to walk through it. I slung the duffel over my shoulder and locked the apartment, my steps lighter than they'd been in days. The drive to my house stretched ahead, and with it a chance to stand in my own space, to build something new. I wasn't erasing last night's pain, but I was done letting it define me. The road hummed under my tires, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving towards something, not running away. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the driveway of my cottage, its white siding glowing under the late afternoon sun. I stepped out, the air crisp with the scent of pine, and stood still, taking in the sloped roof, the porch I'd stained last summer, the flower beds I'd weeded by hand. This was mine, every inch earned, and today it felt like more than a house. It was my answer to the voices that had tried to shrink me. I unlocked the door and dropped my bag, the quiet of the place wrapping around me like a hug. The living room smelled of fresh paint, the walls a soft cream I'd chosen after weeks of swatches. I walked to the mantel where I'd set a small wooden box, one I hadn't opened in months. Inside was a stack of letters Dad had written me before he passed, little notes of encouragement he'd slip into my lunchbox. I pulled one out, his slanted handwriting steady as ever. "You don't need to be loud to be strong." I pressed it to my chest, his words a shield against the sting of Mom's table. Sarah arrived first, her car bouncing down the drive, her laugh spilling out before she even parked. She hugged me tight, her eyes scanning the house. "This is you," she said, touching the woven rug I'd found at a flea market. "It's perfect." Patricia came next, carrying a basket of homemade bread. Her smile warm but knowing, like she saw the weight I was carrying. We set the table together, mismatched plates and thrifted glasses, the kind of meal that didn't need to impress, just to feel like home. As the candles flickered, I gave them a tour, my voice steady, as I pointed out the bookshelf I'd built, the kitchen tiles I'd laid after 3 failed attempts. Sarah ran her fingers along the counter, grinning. "You did all this? I'm calling you for my next DIY disaster." Patricia lingered by the window, looking out at the small garden I'd started, a patch of lavender and daisies. "Your dad would have loved this," she said softly. And my throat tightened, but I nodded, proud. The doorbell rang and my stomach dropped. I hadn't invited anyone else, but there was Nathan standing on the porch, his hands in his pockets, his face uncertain. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low. Sarah glanced at me, ready to step in, but I nodded, stepping outside. The evening air was cool, the sky streaked with pink. Nathan shuffled, looking at the porch swing I'd hung. "I didn't know, Em," he said. "About your house? I'm happy for you, but why didn't you tell me?" His question wasn't sharp, but it carried years of distance of me fading into his background. I crossed my arms, choosing my words. "I needed it to be mine first, Nathan, not something for Mom to measure." He nodded, his jaw tight, and for a moment I saw the kid he used to be, the one who'd cry when I patched his scraped knees. "I get it," he said finally. "I just wish I'd known." He didn't apologize, not outright, but his presence was a start, and I let it be enough for now. Back inside, the table was alive with laughter, Sarah telling stories, Patricia passing bread. I hung the house sign above the door, its carved letters catching the light. As I stepped back, my eyes met Patricia's, her nod small but fierce, like she knew what this moment cost me. I stood there, the room warm around me, and felt something shift, a quiet strength settling in my bones. I wasn't just opening my home. I was claiming my place, and no one could take that away. A week after the housewarming, I sat on my cottage's couch, the late morning light filtering through the curtains I'd sewn last month. The memory of Sarah's laughter and Patricia's bread lingered, a warmth that steadied me, but the quiet now felt heavy. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, Nathan's name flashing. I hesitated, then answered, my voice cautious. He wanted to come over to talk, and I agreed, though my stomach nodded. His visit at the housewarming had cracked open a door, but I wasn't sure how wide I wanted it. He arrived an hour later, his coat dusted with early December frost. We sat at my small kitchen table, mugs of tea steaming between us. "I've been thinking about what you said," he started, his fingers tracing the mug's handle. "About needing your house to be yours. I get it, Em. Mom's always put me on this pedestal, and I didn't see how it pushed you down." His words were careful, like he was stepping on new ground, and I saw a flicker of the brother who'd once shared his comic books with me. I sipped my tea, the chamomile sharp on my tongue. "It wasn't just Mom," I said, my voice low. It was the way everyone leaned into it like my life didn't count unless it looked like yours. Nathan's eyes dropped and he nodded slow and heavy. I never meant to make you feel that way, he said. But I felt it too, you know. Her expectations. Like I had to keep winning to keep her proud. His honesty caught me off guard, a glimpse into a pressure I hadn't fully seen. For the first time, I wondered if he'd been carrying his own kind of weight. Sarah called later, her voice bright through the phone. That night at your place was magic, she said. It's like I saw the real you, Em. You should talk to your mom. She needs to see it too. I murmured agreement, but my chest tightened. Mom had texted me yesterday a short message. Your house sounds lovely. We'll talk soon. No apology, no warmth, just words that felt like a formality. I stared at the text now, my thumb hovering, unsure if I wanted to reply. I walked to the bookshelf, pulling out an old journal I'd kept in college, its pages filled with dreams I'd scribbled after late-night talks with Dad. One entry caught my eye, written after he'd taken me fishing. You'll build a life that's yours, Em. Not for anyone else. I traced his words. My fingers steady, but my heart uneven. Nathan's visit, Sarah's call, Mom's text. They were ripples from the stone I'd thrown at Thanksgiving, but they didn't erase the years of being unseen. Nathan stood to leave, pausing at the door. I want to fix this, he said, his voice soft but firm. Us. The way things got messed up. I nodded, but my smile was thin, the space between us still fragile. As his car pulled away, I leaned against the doorframe, the winter air biting my skin. Mom's text glowed on my phone unanswered, and I felt a stillness settle over me like the moment before a storm. I wasn't ready to move, not yet, and the weight of what came next pressed hard against my ribs. I sat at a corner table in the coffee shop, the hum of conversation and clinking mugs fading as Mom slid into the seat across from me. Her coat was buttoned tight, her scarf loose, and her eyes darted to the window before meeting mine. I'd asked to meet here, neutral ground, the letter I'd written folded in my pocket, unsent but heavy. The steam from my latte curled between us, and I waited, my hands still on the table, for her to speak first. You wanted to talk, she said finally. Her voice clipped like she was bracing for a fight. I nodded, choosing my words like steps on thin ice. I needed you to know how it felt, Mom. At Thanksgiving. All those years. Being the one who's never enough. Her lips pressed tight and she looked down at her coffee untouched. I kept going, my voice low but steady, telling her about the nights I doubted myself, the way her praise for Nathan had drowned out my own quiet wins. She shifted her fingers, twisting the edge of her scarf. I didn't mean to hurt you, Emily, she said, but her tone was defensive, like I'd accused her of something unfair. I was proud of Nathan. I thought you'd tell me if you had something big like your house. Her words were careful, but they didn't reach me, didn't touch the ache I'd carried. I leaned back, my chest tight, and said I tried. But you never asked. You never saw me. The barista, a young woman with a braided ponytail, passed by, catching my eye. She smiled soft and quick, like she'd overheard and understood. It was a small thing, but it steadied me. Mom's gaze flicked up, and for a moment I thought she'd say something real. Something that could mend the frayed thread between us. Instead, she sighed, her shoulders slumping. I just wanted the best for you both, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe I got it wrong. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was the closest she'd come. I nodded, my throat burning, and looked at the watch on my wrist, Dad's old one, its second hand ticking softly. Time was something I'd learned to guard, to spend on what mattered. I wanted to forgive her, to bridge this gap, but her words felt like a door half open, not wide enough to walk through. I thought of Nathan's visit, his effort to see me, and wished Mom could meet me halfway too. She reached for her coffee, then stopped, her hand hovering. I kept your dad's inheritance from Nathan, she said suddenly, her voice low, almost a confession. I thought it'd push you to work harder, not rely on it. My breath caught the revelation sharp like a shard of glass. She'd shaped my struggle not just with words, but with choices, and never told me. I stared at her, the weight of it sinking in my fingers, curling around the watch's leather strap. The coffee shop felt too small, the air too thick. Mom's eyes were on me waiting, but I had no words left. I stood my chair, scraping softly, and pulled my coat on the letter still in my pocket, its edges worn. "I need time," I said, my voice barely audible. She nodded, her face pale, and I walked out, the bell above the door chiming behind me. The winter air hit my face, and I stood on the sidewalk, my breath visible, feeling the world slow my heart, heavy with a truth I hadn't been ready to carry. The Sunday morning sun spilled soft and golden across my cottage's hardwood floors, warming the air with a quiet promise. I knelt by the garden bed outside my back door, my hands in the cool soil, planting tulip bulbs I'd bought on a whim at the hardware store. Each one was a small act of faith, a belief they'd bloom come spring. After the coffee shop with Mom, after Nathan's visit, after the weight of truths I hadn't expected, this moment felt like a pause, a chance to breathe. The garden was my own, a square of earth I'd cleared of weeds and rocks over months. I pressed a bulb into the dirt, covering it gently, and thought of Dad. He'd loved this kind of work. His hands always smudged with soil, his voice low as he'd tell me plants were patient like people could be. I'd carried that lesson without knowing it through years of saving, of building this life one steady step at a time. Now, with the ache of Mom's words still lingering, I felt it more clearly. Patience wasn't just waiting. It was choosing what to hold on to. I dusted my hands and stood, stretching my back, my eyes catching the shimmer of frost on the grass. The cottage stood solid behind me, its windows reflecting the sky, and I felt a pride that wasn't loud, but deep like roots. I'd opened it to Sarah and Patricia, let them see me, and that had changed something. The house wasn't just a place anymore. It was a marker of who I'd become, someone who could stand tall even when the ground felt shaky. Patricia's car pulled up, the engine's hum soft against the morning quiet. She stepped out, a tin of cookies in her hands, her scarf bright against her coat. "Couldn't stay away," she said, her smile warm, and I laughed, leading her inside. We sat at the counter, the cookies sweet and crumbly, and she asked how I was holding up. I told her about Mom, the coffee shop, the inheritance she'd hidden. Patricia listened, her eyes steady, and when I finished, she reached for my hand. "You're stronger than you know," she said. "Not because you fought, but because you chose your own way." Her words settled in me like the bulbs in the soil, something to grow into. I thought of Mom, her half apology, her struggle to see me. I wanted her to understand, to meet me where I stood, but I was starting to see that her limits weren't mine. I'd built this life, this home, without her blueprint, and that was enough. Patricia shared a story of her own about a sister who'd never fully seen her either, and we sat there, two women carrying old hurts, but finding light in the sharing. I walked her to the door, the tin lighter now, and hugged her longer than usual. The air was still, the world holding its breath, and I felt a quiet shift inside me. I wasn't chasing Mom's approval anymore, not the way I used to. I was learning to let go, to plant my own seeds, and trust they'd grow. As Patricia's car disappeared down the drive, I stood on the porch, my hands in my pockets, the winter chill soft against my face, and let the moment hold me. Sarah and I walked through the park near my cottage, the December air sharp, the ground dusted with the season's first snow. Our boots crunched softly, and the bare trees stood like quiet sentinels, their branches etched against the gray sky. I zipped my jacket higher, my breath visible, feeling the world slow around us. Sarah's scarf trailed loose, and she talked about her plans, her voice bright with ideas about confronting her own family's expectations. "You inspired me, Em," she said, her eyes catching mine. "Seeing you stand up, it's like you gave me permission." I smiled, tucking my hands deeper into my pockets. Her words warmed me, but they also stirred a quiet ache. I'd spent so long trying to be seen, to carve out my place, and now, with the dust settling from Thanksgiving, I was starting to see myself differently. Not as the daughter who fell short, or the sister in the background, but as someone who'd built a life worth living, even if it didn't shout for attention. We stopped by a frozen pond, its surface glinting under the weak sun. Sarah bent to pick up a pebble, smooth and gray, and handed it to me. "For your garden," she said, grinning. I turned it over in my palm, its weight solid, unyielding. It reminded me of the choices I'd made, the ones that didn't make headlines but held me steady. I slipped it into my pocket, a small promise to keep building one step at a time. Sarah kept talking about her dreams, her fears, and I listened, nodding, but my mind drifted to Mom. Our coffee shop talk hadn't fixed everything, hadn't erased the years of her measuring me against Nathan. But I didn't need it to. I was learning to carry her love without letting it define me. I thought of Dad, how he'd sit by the window with his coffee, watching the world wake up, and tell me life was about finding your own rhythm. I'd found mine here in this town, in this home, with people who saw me clear. A family passed us, their voices sharp as they argued about holiday plans. I watched them, a mother tugging her kid's hand, a father trailing behind, and felt a pang. I'd been that kid once, caught in the push and pull of family, but I wasn't anymore. I'd stepped out, drawn my own lines. Sarah nudged me, pointing to a squirrel darting up a tree, and we laughed, the sound soft in the cold air. She mentioned Nathan texting her saying he wanted to visit my place again, and I nodded, feeling a flicker of hope, not for a grand fix, but for something new between us. We turned back toward the park's entrance, the light fading, the snow dusting our shoulders. I held the pebble in my pocket, its edges smooth against my fingers, and felt a stillness settle in me. I wasn't running from the past or chasing anyone's approval. I was just walking one foot in front of the other, my heart steady, my path my own. The world was quiet, and for the first time in a long time, I was too. The New Year's gathering filled my cottage with a soft hum, the kind that comes from good food and better company. I stood by the kitchen counter, pouring wine into mismatched glasses, the glow of string lights wrapping the room in warmth. Sarah was rearranging chairs, her laughter bright as she teased Patricia about her cookie recipe. Nathan leaned against the wall, quieter than usual, but his presence felt like a step, not a shadow. Mom had come too, her visit brief but deliberate, a sign she was trying, even if it was just a start. I'd set the table with carecloth napkins I'd found at a thrift store, a centerpiece of pine cones I'd gathered on a walk. The simplicity of it grounded me, a reminder of the life I'd built, not to prove anything, but because it was mine. I caught my reflection in the window, my face softer than it had been at Thanksgiving, the tension I'd carried for months easing like a slow exhale. I wasn't the same woman who'd sat silent at Mom's table, biting back her truth. Sarah called everyone to eat, and we crowded around the table, plates piled with lasagna and garlic bread. I raised my glass, my voice steady but warm. To new beginnings, I said, my eyes meeting Nathan's, then Patricia's. To building what matters, no matter how long it takes. The clink of glasses felt like a promise, not just to them, but to myself. I'd spent years measuring my worth by Mom's yardstick, but here in this room, I was enough. Mom had left early, her smile tight, but her hug lingering, a quiet acknowledgement of our coffee shop talk. I didn't need her to say everything I'd once hoped for. I'd learned to let go of that hunger to find my own light. Nathan caught me later, helping with dishes, his sleeves rolled up. "I'm trying to get it, Em," he said, scrubbing a plate. "You, this place, I'm proud of you." His words weren't grand, but they were honest, and I nodded, feeling the old distance between us shrink just a little. I stepped outside for a moment, the January air sharp against my cheeks. The stars were bright, scattered like seeds across the sky, and I thought of the woman I'd been, the one who'd hidden her victories to avoid judgment. She was still part of me, but I was learning to carry her gently, to forgive her for staying small. I wrapped my sweater tighter, my breath clouding in the cold, and felt the weight of the past settle, not gone, but quieter, like a book I'd finally closed. Back inside, the gathering had softened, the plates cleared, the conversation settling into a gentle rhythm. I sat on the couch, a quilt over my lap, watching Sarah sketch on a napkin, her pencil scratching out a dream house she'd build someday. Patricia dozed in an armchair, her glasses slipping, a faint smile on her face. Nathan was gone, his goodbye brief but warm, a promise to visit again. The room felt full, not just of people, but of something I'd been searching for, a sense of belonging that didn't demand I change. I leaned back, my fingers brushing the quilt stitches, each one a small, deliberate act, like the choices I'd made since that Thanksgiving night. I'd stood up, not with a shout, but with a truth that reshaped my world. Mom's half steps toward me. Nathan's effort, the love from Sarah and Patricia, they weren't the whole story. The real change was in me and the way I'd learned to hold my own worth to let it shine without needing anyone's mirror. I thought of the mornings I'd started lately, waking early to sit by the window with tea watching the world stir. Those quiet hours were mine, a ritual of reclaiming myself, of listening to my own voice after years of drowning it out. I'd begun writing again, not letters or journals, but stories, small pieces of who I was tucked into a notebook I kept by my bed. They weren't for anyone else, just for me, a way to remember I was more than someone's daughter or sister. The lesson wasn't loud or grand. It was in the way I'd stopped waiting for Mom to see me fully, in the boundaries I'd set without anger, in the home I'd opened to those who met me where I stood. I'd learned that healing doesn't mean fixing everything. It means choosing yourself even when it's hard, even when it's quiet. It means forgiving the people who hurt you, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. And it means building a life that feels true, not to prove a point, but to live one. I looked around the room at the faces lit by the soft glow of the lights and felt a stillness I hadn't known I could hold. This was my story now, not a reaction to anyone else's, but a path I'd carved with my own hands. I didn't need to be the loudest or the brightest. I just needed to be me, and that was more than enough. What's a moment you chose yourself, even when it was hard? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. If this resonated, give it a like. Maybe share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more stories that hit close to home. Thank you for being here, for listening. Here's to finding your own quiet strength today and always.